Hi, Scott from Digital Fish with content that catches. A break in the winter weather was what I was looking for, and it came midweek with 14 knot westerlies. My fishing companion today was another keen fisherman, Juan de Rook. I had to practice saying his last name for about 10 minutes and I still couldn't get it right. It was an easy unload and it wasn't long before we were set up and getting bites from the resident snapper. Most of the time you start small and hopefully work your way up to the bigger fish. We had some gentle sideways current and the fish were cruising up the kelp and finding our baits without much trouble. KAHAWAI started to show up as usual, and these fish were in pretty good condition. Most of the morning was hook, play and land, a steady stream of average snapper and KAHAWAI. The moon phase wasn't looking particularly fishy, but that doesn't stop me fishing. I've caught a really good fish here and there on a bad moon phase, even if the fish weren't in a biting frenzy. It took a while to finally get something we could keep for dinner, but Joanne and I finally got a keeper each as the tide started to slowly creep up the rocks. Before we had to go, I thought I'd give the splash drone a fly. It had been a very pleasant morning, but we were hungry for some better action, so shifted to a nearby point and anchored up. My very first bait got a solid hit. The up and down fight near the bottom had me guessing a nice sized snapper, but to my surprise a KAHAWAI popped up and jumped all over the place. The next fish was also fighting like a snapper, but turned out to be a KAHAWAI trying to be a snapper. Juan hooked a big sized KAHAWAI which swam around the burley line and had to be hand lined home. Things went a bit quiet, so we moved back down the coast to find a good spot to fish into dusk, which coincided with the last 2 hours of low tide. My first hit was a good one, and this time it had snapper written all over it. Short powerful runs for the kelp and the usual nod of a good sized fish. At one stage he stopped trying to pull line and rushed the boat, but the hook stuck and it wasn't too long before he was near the surface and thrashing around. Juan passed me the net but had to click it into place first. As I reached over to net the fish, I got a nasty surprise. Thankfully, I managed to snag the net without losing the fish, and Juan jumped to the rescue and put his long arms to good use, netting a lovely 4 kilo snapper. Trevally can also turn up here, although they aren't always a keeping size. I had an unruly KAHAWAI run around Juan's line, so I netted the fish to get it under control. Just then Juan had a big hit and we were scrambling to clear the lines. Juan couldn't strike in time and the fish escaped, sadly.
It's on. It was big. Man. That was really big.
The next KAHAWAI had an injury, maybe a predator or maybe a gash from being caught and badly handled by another fisherman. The size of fish were getting better, including another good snapper which ran into the kelp and got away. Juan was onto another good fish, but...
No! It was right there!
It was right there!
Why?
No!
That was your size!
No.
Juan's next fish was a keeper, but not in the same league as the ones he'd lost. The bag was getting heavier and the day was getting longer. The wind died down nicely, but we were running out of daylight. We were down to our last baits, waiting for another big one to strike. I hooked up briefly, but he spat the hook. We had a great day out and a good feed of fish to bring home. This is Scott from Digital Fish with content that catches.